Well, thank you very much for joining me on this video. I had a phone call from an agent the other day asking me if I had a property management agreement. Turned out he had a client who had purchased an investment property and he wanted him to manage the property. And I thought about that and I thought, no, not only do I not have a property management agreement, I can't think that I've ever particularly seen one. So I drafted something up. Now, if there's an actual property management agreement floating around out there somewhere, I just haven't seen it. It's probably better than the one I've come up with, but this is a starting point, and I want to go over it because there's some critical things that need to be covered that I've tried to cover in this property management agreement. And let me start by saying I'm not trying to turn you into property managers. This is not meant to cover a commercial management agreement where you might be managing a plaza. It's not meant to cover if you're managing a 100-unit apartment building where there's a superintendent on site. This is a situation where, in most likelihood, you have sold a property to an investor. It may be a start-out investor, and he's never really been a landlord before. Or it may be somebody, for example, a snowbird, who is away part of the time, and he isn't there to give hands-on management. And so he asks you to manage the property for him, and you need something in writing as a meeting of the minds of what you're expected to do, what you're not expected to do, how you handle the finances, and how you're paid. So we've drafted up a property management agreement, which is on the screen. I want to go over it clause by clause. I'll go over it very quickly, and it'll be there to be downloaded. If you want to use it, it's there. If you want to modify it, feel free to absolutely modify it, but it gives you a starting point. So it's between the landlord and the manager. We identify the property, described as duplex, triplex, single family home, semi-detached, whatever, and the effective date. When does it start? All right, the term and termination says that it's a one-year contract, but it's actually an annual self-perpetuating contract, which if it's not terminated, is automatically renewed on its anniversary for another year. It also says either party can terminate the contract without reason by notice in writing delivered to the other party with at least 30 days notice from the start of a month. Then it goes on to say a tenant. And it's a little bit like a commercial lease where it says it's a triple net lease. It's a carefree lease to the landlord. This is a carefree management agreement on behalf of the owner of the property. And the intent is that the overall intent of this management agreement is to relieve the landlord of much of the day-to-day obligations of attending to the property. As such, a manager shall function as his agent and represent him in interactions with tenants, trades, service providers, and so on. Then it goes on the agreement, and it says the landlord appoints the manager as his agent for the purpose of giving and receiving tenant notices, including but not limited to notice of rent increases, notice of cease and desist, objectionable behavior, notice to vacate, eviction notice, notice to attend property for inspections, repairs, or showings. The landlord also authorizes the manager to act on his behalf in arranging and engaging trades and sub-trades, repair and maintenance workers, utility providers, and so on. So he's given you a carte blanche to step into his shoes and represent him in writing. Then the scope of work. Scope of work is you collect rent, including first and last month's rent, execute new leases, and responsible for dispersing the proceeds to the landlord. You advertise the unit for rent in the event of a vacancy notice, and then you screen tenants, show the unit to prospective tenants, provide and collect rental applications, perform due diligence as to the suitability of the tenant, and make recommendations to the landlord, but he ultimately makes the final decision. You handle all tenant calls, complaints, requests for repairs, and so on behalf of the landlord. And that's where you're taking a huge burden off the shoulders of the landlord. And I want to tell you why this is so important. As I said, I'm not trying to turn you into property managers, but if you sold a property to somebody who's starting out as an investor, but he wants to be an investor, he doesn't want to be a landlord, you're becoming the middleman so that he is an investor rather than a landlord in the strictest sense of the word, because you're handling the day-to-day frustrating. And that's why people get out of the business of being a landlord. That's why they sell the property. You want to ease that burden from him. Hopefully, he will buy more properties through you, and you provide this service, which is invaluable. Okay, so the manager is responsible for performing or hiring necessary personnel to perform all necessary maintenance repairs to the property. And I go on to say it's understood that the manager will not attend to the property to do the repair himself unless in an emergency situation. Expenditures of an excessive amount anticipated to exceed $1,000 won't be done without the landlord's previous approval. And the landlord shall reimburse the manager for costs of any out-of-pocket expenses. Then arrange, where required, exterior yard, lawn, garden maintenance, which costs shall be borne by the landlord. May include fall cleanup, leaf removal, garden cleanup. Will require the approval of the landlord. I have a duplex or a triplex. I have the main floor tenant responsible to cut the grass. I have found they don't particularly weed the garden. They don't particularly rake the lawn in the fall from leaves. And so I need a fall cleanup. And so the landlord, if he drives by the property and sees the garden all overgrown and sees it a mess, he's not going to be thrilled. You need to anticipate that in this management agreement. Is it going to be done? How's it going to be paid for? And so on. So that's there. And the same thing with snow removal in the winter. And that's covered as well. Now, next one says annual inspection to determine cleanliness and maintenance, to check function of all smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, and to change all batteries in such devices, and provide status report to the landlord. Inspect upon tenant giving notice to vacate, to determine repairs necessary to prepare for new occupant, and provide a report to the landlord, and then arrange for the trades necessary to do those repairs to get the unit ready to rent out again. Then in the event that legal proceedings become necessary, in the eviction of a tenant, the manager shall prepare and serve the tenant on behalf of the landlord with the appropriate eviction forms. However, should the process proceed beyond that point and involve the courts, you won't be responsible as a manager to go any further, but you will arrange for the proper paralegal or other professional to act on the landlord's behalf. And finally, prepare and serve annual rent increases. And then financing is important. I've given you two options. Option one, if I can paraphrase, option one, where all the invoices are sent to the landlord on anything that has needed to be done in the way of repair and maintenance, and he pays it. All rents are forwarded to the landlord. The landlord pays the bills and pays you on a monthly basis. I got in there that in all cases, the landlord will pay these debts within 10 days. And that's really important to me. I have a number of trades that I rely on, whether it's a plumber, or whether it's an electrician, or whether it's a painter, or whether it's a maintenance guy, people that are good that I rely on. And I pride myself on paying them promptly. They've got, if it's a business, they got employees to pay. If it's a sole proprietor, they got food to put on their table. They need this money, and I don't want to hold them up. And so they know that it'll be looked after prominently. If I call them on behalf of another property that I'm managing, they're going to expect the same response. But suddenly I'm not the one paying the bill, the landlord is. So I want to make sure that he pays as promptly as I do, and if he doesn't, I'll terminate the contract. Very, very important to do that, and it's in there. Option number two is you maintain an account, a dedicated account, you collect the rents, you pay the bills, you give it a statement of account on a monthly basis, and you send any surplus over $1,000 to the landlord on a monthly basis. And as I said before, if you've got somebody who's out of town, and especially somebody who's away for 3 or 4 months in the winter, they're going to want option two. So you've given them the options, they initial one or the other, whichever option, and you proceed accordingly. The next one is insurance, and I've got in here that the landlord will carry general insurance on the property, including personal liability and injury, as well as property damage. Remember that I am in writing his manager. I'm stepping into his shoes. So if a tenant falls, breaks their arm, and they argue that there should have been a railing going down the stairs to the basement and it wasn't there, they're probably going to name you in the lawsuit as well as the landlord. And I want to make sure the landlord has liability insurance in that case. And it's going to cover me because, first of all, because he appointed me, and secondly, because number 7, I got an indemnification clause in there where the landlord will not hold the manager, and in the event he is working in his capacity as real estate salesperson, his brokerage and representatives of the brokerage responsible for any loss or damage to the property or contents occurring during the term of this agreement, and further indemnify same for and against any claim made by anyone who occupies, attends, or visits the property being managed. And then we go to fees and compensation. And you can do it one of two ways. You can either charge a flat monthly fee or you can charge a percentage. Neither one is right or wrong. There's advantages and disadvantages of both. If you charge a flat fee every month, you're going to get paid when the unit is vacant. If you charge a percentage, then if the vacancy occurs And because of what's happened in the marketplace, you charge twice the amount of rent. The landlord benefits, but so do you because you're getting the same percentage. So it gives you the opportunity to do it either way, and you negotiate that between you and the landlord. And I've seen it anywhere between 4% and 10% if it's a percentage, depending on how much work's involved, depending on whether it's a single family, a triplex, fourplex, and so on. And then it goes on to say, if the unit becomes vacant, the manager shall receive in compensation 1 month rent upon a new tenant being selected and taking occupancy. Understood and agreed that all advertising costs incurred in attracting a new tenant should be borne by the manager, same as if he listed it. The manager may elect to utilize the services of a real estate board MLS, and in so doing, any compensation paid to the cooperating brokerage shall not increase the total amount being paid by the landlord. And then number 9 says it's the entire agreement. There's nothing else that is he said, she said, you were supposed to do this. That's not my responsibility. It's all covered in here. So I hope that gives you a template if you find yourself in this situation. And if you're dealing with investors, I think you need to seriously think of stepping into the shoes of being a manager for them to help them out, especially if they're a first-time investor because they've never done it before, or if they're an out-of-town investor where it just isn't practical for them to attend on the property when a tap drips. Then you may want to offer these services. It'll cement the relationship you've got with them as an investor as they move forward. I hope that makes sense. It's available for you to download, print, modify, whatever you like. Thank you very much for joining me in this video. I'll talk to you again very soon.